David Cameron says the draft deal aimed at keeping Britain in the EU will deliver the substantial change he has been demanding to how it is run. But the UK Prime Minister said there was detail to be worked on before a crunch summit on 18 to 19 February. The deal, which includes an emergency brake on migrant benefits, paves the way for the UK's EU referendum to take place as early as June. EU exit campaigners said it did not come close to what the PM had promised. But the Prime Minister says it is a deal worth fighting for, and he is launching a fresh round of diplomacy to persuade other EU leaders to sign up to it. Mr. Cameron's proposed 4-year ban on in-work benefits for EU migrant workers could come into force immediately if the UK votes to remain in the Union. But it would have to be agreed by other EU nations, and it would be graduated, with more money from tax credits paid to migrants the longer they remain in the UK. It says Mr. Cameron's demand to exempt Britain from the EU principle of ever closer union between member states would be written into a future treaty. There are also measures relating to protection for non-Euro countries in the EU, a new way for member states to club together to block some new EU laws, and on business regulations. Mr. Cameron will visit Poland and Denmark on Friday, as he embarks on a whirlwind charm offensive to persuade the other 27 EU leaders to sign up to the Tusk package in Brussels on February 18 to 19. If Mr. Cameron can get an agreement in February, he is expected to hold a referendum in June on whether Britain should remain in the EU. Mr. Cameron has until the end of 2017 to hold a referendum. A July or September referendum remains a possibility, but a repeat of last summer's migrant crisis in the Mediterranean and Eastern Europe could make Mr. Cameron's job of making the case for remaining in a reformed EU more difficult. A cross-party group of MPs, led by the SNP, has warned Mr. Cameron against holding the EU referendum in June, arguing it will be too close to elections in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, London, and local authorities. Labour has said it will not block a June referendum. What David Cameron said about the deal. The Prime Minister said more work needed to be done to nail down details, but added, "We said we needed to deliver in 4 key areas. This document shows real progress on that front." He said the proposals were something worth fighting for, and were good enough that he would back Britain joining the EU under these terms, if it was not already a member. He said Britain could have the best of both worlds by giving it access to the single market and a voice around the top EU table, while retaining its status as a proud independent country not part of a superstate. He said ministers would be free to campaign for either side in a personal capacity, but the government would not be taking some sort of neutral position. "If we get this deal in February or in March or later, and if the cabinet agrees to this deal, the government's position will be to campaign for Britain to stay in a reformed European Union." Asked by the BBC's Laura Kinsberg if he could guarantee the reforms would cut immigration and had not been watered down, he said, "I can say, hand on heart, I have delivered the commitments made in my manifesto." Read more from Laura Kinsberg. What those who want the UK to leave the EU say. Richard Tice, co-founder of Leave.eu, accused Mr. Cameron of trying to deceive the British people by saying that there's substantial change. "There is nothing except a restatement of the existing status quo." The Vote Leave campaign said Mr. Cameron had broken a key Conservative manifesto pledge to insist on a 4-year ban on in-work benefits, saying that the ban was now conditional. Former Defence Secretary Liam Fox said the proposals did not come close to the changes voters had been promised. UKIP leader Nigel Farage said Mr. Cameron's deal was pathetic and hardly worth the wait. President of the European Council Mr. Tusk said the package was a good basis for a compromise, adding that there are still challenging negotiations ahead. "Nothing is agreed until everything is agreed." Conservative reaction. 2 of the favourites to succeed David Cameron as Conservative leader, Boris Johnson and Theresa May, have also been touted as possible figureheads for the campaign to leave the EU. Mr. Johnson, the London mayor, said he had doubts about the red card mechanism, saying there was much more that needs to be done on European reform. Home Secretary Mrs May also said more needed to be done, but added, "This is a basis for a deal." BBC political editor Laura Kinsberg said she appeared on the verge of backing the Prime Minister and that her reaction would come as a blow to the Out campaign.